What if I told you that just hours before his historic meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing, President Trump called one of China's biggest bluffs, forced them to completely capitulate before negotiations even began. And on the very same morning, the Trump administration caught and charged a Chinese spy who was actually serving as a mayor right here in the United States. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Right now, something absolutely extraordinary is unfolding on the world stage. President Trump is about to sit down with the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. And before Air Force One even touched the ground in Beijing, Trump had already won the first battle. China blinked. China caved. China surrendered before the meeting even started. If you believe that America should never bow to the Chinese Communist Party and that President Trump is exactly the leader we need to stand up to Beijing, smash that like button right now. And let the algorithm know that patriots are paying attention. Every click helps spread the truth about how Trump is putting America first on the world stage. Because here's what just happened. For 6 years, the Chinese Communist Party had Secretary of State Marco Rubio on a blacklist. He was banned from entering China. He was sanctioned by Beijing. He was forbidden from ever setting foot in the country. Why? Because Marco Rubio had the courage to call out the CCP's genocide against the Uyghur people in Western China. He condemned their human rights violations. He told the truth about what was happening in Xinjiang province. And for that, China blacklisted him. Well, this morning, President Trump loaded Marco Rubio onto Air Force One at the last minute. He did not ask China for permission. He did not negotiate. He simply put his Secretary of State on the plane and informed China after they were already in the air. And what did China do? They completely caved. They waived the sanctions. They lifted the ban. And now they're going to have to greet Marco Rubio on a red carpet in Beijing. Think about what that means. The same man they blacklisted for condemning their genocide is now going to walk into their capital as the representative of the United States of America. And there is nothing they can do about it. That is what American strength looks like. That is what happens when you have a president who does not take orders from Beijing. That is Donald Trump calling China's bluff and winning before the meeting even begins. Stay with me, because this story gets even better. On the very same morning, the Trump administration just caught a Chinese spy serving as a mayor in California. And what she was doing will absolutely shock you. Now, let me give you some important background on the Marco Rubio situation, because this goes back 6 years and it matters. In the Western Chinese province of Xinjiang, the Chinese Communist Party has been conducting what many people have described as a genocide against an ethnic group called the Uyghurs. At a minimum, we know that a massive slave labor operation has been taking place. We know that millions of Uyghurs have been thrown into concentration camps. We know that forced sterilizations have occurred. We know that families have been separated. We know that cultural and religious practices have been suppressed. This is not controversial. This is documented. This is happening right now in China. And back in 2020, when Marco Rubio was still a senator, he had the courage to publicly condemn what was happening. He called it out. He named it. He demanded accountability. The CCP was furious. They were absolutely livid that an American senator would dare to criticize their internal policies. And so they did what authoritarian regimes always do. They tried to punish him. China announced that Marco Rubio was banned from entering the country. They placed personal sanctions on him. They blacklisted him and tried to make an example out of him. The message was clear. If you criticize the Chinese Communist Party, there will be consequences. For 6 years, that ban remained in place. Marco Rubio could not visit China. He could not participate in diplomatic meetings in Beijing. He was persona non grata in the eyes of the CCP. And then Donald Trump became president again. Now, here is what happened this morning. President Trump was preparing to fly to Beijing for his historic meeting with Xi Jinping. The original plan was for Marco Rubio to stay behind in the United States, while Trump, Vance, Kushner, and others traveled to China. After all, Rubio was banned. The Chinese had made it clear he was not welcome. The diplomatic path of least resistance would have been to leave him home. But that is not how Donald Trump operates. At the last minute, Trump made a decision. He loaded Secretary of State Marco Rubio onto Air Force One. He brought along the very man China had banned for condemning their genocide. And here is the best part. Trump only informed China after the plane was already in the air. He did not ask for permission. He did not negotiate terms. He simply told them, my Secretary of State is coming, and there is nothing you can do about it. China had two choices at that point. They could refuse to accept Rubio and create an international incident that would embarrass them before the entire world. Or they could cave and pretend they had never banned him in the first place. they chose to cave. Within hours, China announced they were waiving the sanctions on Marco Rubio. They lifted the ban. They are going to roll out the red carpet for the very man they tried to silence 6 years ago. This is absolute humiliation for the CCP. They spent 6 years pretending they had leverage over American officials. They spent 6 years trying to intimidate anyone who would criticize their human rights record. They spent 6 years acting like their blacklist meant something. And Donald Trump just showed the entire world that it means nothing. When China bans an American official and an American president simply ignores that ban and brings the official anyway, and China backs down, that tells you everything about the real balance of power. China is not as strong as they pretend to be. Their threats are hollow. Their sanctions are meaningless. And when faced with an American president who refuses to be intimidated, they fold. That is the lesson of this morning. And it is a lesson that will echo through these negotiations in Beijing.
Now, let me tell you about the Chinese spy, because this story broke on the exact same morning, and it is absolutely outrageous. A mayor in California has just resigned and pleaded guilty to being an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. Her name is Eileen Wang, and she was the mayor of Arcadia, California. Let that sink in. A sitting American mayor, elected by American citizens, was secretly working for a hostile foreign government. According to federal prosecutors, here's what she was doing. She operated a fake website that pretended to be a news source for the Chinese American community. It looked like a legitimate news outlet. It had articles and opinion pieces and community information. But it was all propaganda. Every word was controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The federal plea agreement says that between 2020 and 2022, Eileen Wang took directives directly from officials of the People's Republic of China on what to post on this fake website. Chinese government officials would tell her what to write, what to share, what narratives to push, and she did exactly what they told her to do. For example, in 2021, she reposted an essay that read, and I quote, "There is no genocide in Xinjiang. There is no such thing as forced labor in any production activity, including cotton production. Spreading such rumors is to defame China. No genocide in Xinjiang." That was the propaganda she was pushing. The exact same genocide that Marco Rubio was banned from China for condemning. The exact same genocide that is documented by human rights organizations around the world. She was actively working to cover up crimes against humanity on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party while serving as an American elected official. And it gets worse. Federal prosecutors say that Chinese officials had such fine control over this fake website that they would message Wang and others about specific paragraphs or edits they wanted in articles. They would give detailed instructions on how to make the CCP look good. After she posted content, Chinese officials would message her in a group chat, saying things like, "So fast, thank you everyone." They were praising her for efficient service to a foreign government. According to prosecutors, she executed directives. She did what they told her to do. They would give her praise for how well she was doing. And she would say, "Thank you, leader. Thank you, leader." An American mayor thanking Chinese Communist Party officials for their guidance. This is treason in everything but the legal definition. As part of her plea agreement, Eileen Wang has resigned as mayor and pleaded guilty to the felony offense of acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government. She faces up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. And here's another detail that should disturb every American. Her fiancé also previously pleaded guilty to espionage charges on behalf of China. Her fiancé was a Chinese spy too. Birds of a feather, as they say. This was not some isolated individual making bad decisions. This was a coordinated intelligence operation with multiple operatives embedded in American society, one of whom managed to get herself elected as a mayor. Now let me connect these two stories because they are deeply related. On the same morning that President Trump is flying to Beijing to negotiate with China, his administration catches and charges a Chinese spy who was working as a mayor in California. On the same morning that Trump forces China to lift their ban on Marco Rubio, we learned that Chinese agents were actively pushing propaganda denying the very genocide Rubio was banned for condemning. This is not a coincidence. This is a reminder of what we are dealing with. The Chinese Communist Party is not a normal government. They're not a friendly competitor. They're not a potential partner in global stability. They are an adversary. They are actively working to undermine the United States from within. They are running spy operations on American soil. They are trying to control what Americans see and read and believe. Senator Ron Johnson spoke about this today, and what he said is absolutely right. He said, the American public ought to read Sun Tzu's Art of War because it is exactly the kind of warfare that China conducts across the board. He said they are long-term thinkers. They have pervasively invaded America with investments into our university system. They have plundered America to the tune of probably trillions of dollars in intellectual property theft. He said, China just does not fight fair. They are an unfriendly adversary who wants to replace us, which would be very bad for the world. That is the reality we are facing. And that is why it matters so much that we finally have a president who understands the threat. For decades, American leaders pretended China was becoming a responsible member of the international community. They said if we just traded with China, if we just engaged with China, if we just gave China what they wanted, eventually they would liberalize and become like us. That was a fantasy. It was a lie that enriched certain American corporations while hollowing out American manufacturing and strengthening a hostile regime. China did not liberalize. They became more authoritarian. They did not become a partner. They became a predator. They did not play by the rules. They stole our technology, manipulated their currency, and flooded our markets with cheap goods produced by slave labor. And all the while, they were running intelligence operations on American soil. They were recruiting spies. They were building influence networks. They were working systematically to weaken America from the inside. The mayor of Arcadia, California, was just one small piece of a massive operation. How many more are there? How many more elected officials, business leaders, academics, journalists are secretly working for the Chinese Communist Party? We do not know. But thanks to the Trump administration, we are finally starting to find out. Now let me talk about what this means for the negotiations in Beijing, because the timing of all this is not accidental. President Trump is about to sit down with Xi Jinping. They're going to discuss trade, tariffs, technology, Taiwan, and 100 other issues that will shape the relationship between the world's two largest economies. And Trump is walking into that meeting from a position of absolute strength. He just forced China to lift their ban on Marco Rubio without asking permission or offering anything in return. He just demonstrated that Chinese threats and sanctions mean nothing when faced with American resolve. He just caught one of their spies and exposed their propaganda operations on American soil. He is showing the Chinese that their covert activities are being detected and shut down. And he's doing all of this publicly, making sure the world sees that America is not intimidated by Beijing. This is masterful negotiating. Before a single word is spoken in the meeting room, Trump has already established dominance. He has shown Xi Jinping that the old ways of dealing with America are over. No more American presidents who bow to Chinese demands. No more American diplomats who tiptoe around Chinese sensitivities. No more American weakness that the CCP can exploit. Trump is sending a message. America is back, and we're not going to be pushed around. Whatever happens in these negotiations, whatever deals are struck or not struck, one thing is certain. China knows they are dealing with a different kind of leader. They know the games they played with previous administrations will not work with Trump. And based on how quickly they caved on the Marco Rubio situation, they know they're not negotiating from a position of strength. Now let me address the broader issue of Chinese infiltration, because this spy case is just the tip of the iceberg. For years, experts have been warning about the extent of Chinese influence operations in the United States. The CCP has been systematically targeting every sector of American society. Universities. China has poured money into American colleges and universities through programs like Confucius Institutes. They have recruited American professors and researchers to share sensitive information. They have sent thousands of students to study at American institutions, some of whom are intelligence operatives. Technology. Chinese companies have stolen American intellectual property worth trillions of dollars. They have hacked American corporations and government agencies. They have forced American companies to transfer technology as a condition of doing business in China. Politics. They have cultivated relationships with American politicians at every level. They have donated to political campaigns through cutouts and intermediaries. They have used their economic leverage to influence American policy. Media. They have bought stakes in American media companies. They have pressured Hollywood to censor content that criticizes China. They have created fake news outlets, like the one run by the Arcadia mayor, to push propaganda directly to American audiences. Business. They have recruited American executives with promises of access to the Chinese market. They have used joint ventures to extract American know-how. They have built supply chain dependencies that give them leverage over American companies. This is not paranoia. This is documented. This is happening every single day. And for decades, American leaders did nothing about it. They were too focused on the economic benefits of engagement with China. They were too worried about offending Beijing. They were too naive to see what was happening right in front of their eyes. President Trump sees it clearly, and he is finally doing something about it. The arrest of the Arcadia mayor is just one example. The Trump administration has been aggressively going after Chinese espionage operations across the country. They have been shutting down Confucius Institutes. They have been investigating technology theft. They have been exposing influence operations. It is going to take years to fully root out the extent of Chinese infiltration. But at least we now have a president who is willing to try. Now let me talk about what this moment means for America's relationship with China going forward. We are at a crossroads. The old approach of engagement and accommodation has failed. The idea that we could turn China into a responsible partner has been proven wrong. We need a new approach. And that new approach starts with strength. President Trump understands this. He knows that China only respects power. He knows that weakness invites aggression. He knows that the only way to get a fair deal from Beijing is to negotiate from a position of dominance. That is what he is doing right now. Every move he makes, from forcing China to accept Rubio, to catching their spies, to imposing tariffs, is designed to demonstrate American strength. The goal is not war. The goal is not conflict. The goal is to make China understand that the era of taking advantage of America is over. If China wants access to American markets, they're going to have to play fair. If China wants normal relations with the United States, they're going to have to stop stealing our technology. If China wants to be treated as a great power, they're going to have to stop running spy operations on our soil. These are reasonable demands. They're the same standards we hold every other country to. The only reason China has gotten away with violating them for so long is because previous American leaders were too weak to enforce them. Trump is different. Trump does not care about being liked by Beijing. Trump does not worry about hurting Chinese feelings. Trump only cares about getting the best deal for the American people. And based on everything we have seen, including China's capitulation this morning, his approach is working. Now, let me close with some thoughts on what this all means for you. You might be wondering why it matters that some mayor in California was a Chinese spy. You might be thinking that what happens in Beijing does not affect your daily life, but it does. It affects all of us. When China steals American technology, American companies lose their competitive advantage. American workers lose their jobs. American communities suffer. When China runs propaganda operations, American public discourse gets corrupted. Americans get fed lies designed to benefit a foreign government. Our democracy gets weakened. When China infiltrates our government, American policy gets distorted. Decisions get made that benefit Beijing instead of American citizens. Our national security gets compromised. This is not some abstract geopolitical game. This is about your job, your community, your country. And that is why it matters so much that we have a president who takes the China threat seriously. For the first time in decades, we have a leader who understands what we are up against. We have a leader who is willing to stand up to Beijing. We have a leader who is putting America first instead of putting China first. President Trump just showed the world what that looks like. He forced China to back down before the negotiations even started. He caught their spies and exposed their operations. He demonstrated American strength in a way that Beijing cannot ignore. That is what it means to have a real leader in the White House. That is what it means to have someone who is not afraid of the Chinese Communist Party. And whatever happens in these negotiations, whatever deals are made or not made, one thing is certain. America is no longer going to be pushed around. China thought they could blacklist Marco Rubio forever. They were wrong. China thought they could run spy operations without consequences. They were wrong. China thought they could keep taking advantage of America. They were wrong. President Trump is changing the game, and the Chinese Communist Party is just starting to realize what that means. Don't stop here. The battle with China is far from over. Click on the next video and join us as we continue to cover President Trump's historic trip to Beijing and everything that comes next in this critical moment for America.